Good morning, afternoon and evening everyone. Welcome to I am too lazy to put on the lights Wednesday. Today we are looking at Evoker. Today we are looking at how Evoker plays, and in particular, in detail, we are looking at Devastation Evoker. So we are looking at the DPS version of Evoker, which apparently turns out it's a warrior. Now, the reason why we are looking at Evoker first is because I believe the spec is in quite the simple state, quite the basic state compared to many other specs. I do consider it the simplest spec to play, on the same level as, perhaps even lower, perhaps even simpler than Havoc Demon Hunter, or simpler than specs like, say, Marksmanship Hunter. It's a very, very simple spec to play. Now, of course, many players will still enjoy, just like there are many players who, for some reason, enjoy Havoc Demon Hunter, or they enjoy Beast Mastery Hunter, Marksmanship Hunter, they will still, of course, enjoy Evoker. I just feel like it's a little bit too simple. So what you see in front of you in the action bars is what's available to Devastation Evoker. And this is not, you know, a particular build. I went out of the way to select every possible takeable damage ability for Evoker. I took Eternity Surge, I took the Cooldown Dragon Rage, I took Firestorm, I took Shattering Star. Basically all of the possible extra buttons you can take in the Devastation Evoker tree, I took them. So this is the max you're going to get if you even go for a build that takes all of them. So these are all of the buttons you're gonna get. The first thing you notice is that there are very, very few buttons compared to most other specs and classes, and also many of these buttons will be conditional, situational cooldowns. For example, down this line you have the things that you will barely ever click. You have things like Glide, right, which is automatic, it just happens by itself. Then you have the buff, the rate buff, which is going to increase the cooldown reduction of your movement abilities by 15%. You have the new version, the new Bloodlust given to Devastation and Preservation Evokers. You have your Visage change, your change of form. And lastly, you have Soar, which is for flying, to jump up in the air. So this is like irrelevant. The actual buttons, all of these, funnily enough, will be cooldowns. If you look at this, you have Hover, which is a 30-second cooldown. You have Obsidian Scales, which is a 2-minute default cooldown, lowered to 1.5. It's your defensive ability. You have Emerald Blossom, which is a 30-second cooldown. You have your Interrupt, which is a 40-second base cooldown, which can be turned into a 20-second cooldown from the talents. You have a Mass Root on a 90-second cooldown, which has been lowered with talents to a 1-minute cooldown. You have Rescue, the swoop to an ally and fly with them to the targeted location on a 1-minute cooldown. You have Wing Buffet to knock enemies away from you on a 90-second cooldown, and Tail Swipe to knock enemies up on a 90-second cooldown. Again, you get to choose, I believe here, which one of the two you want to reduce the cooldown of, the knockback or the knockup. And then you have the Oppressing Roar, which is a CC extension. It's a new type of ability, and you can also further talent it right over here to also enrage the spell and reduce the cooldown of the ability by 20 seconds for each enrage you have dispelled. So all of this is cooldowns. All of this is a 30 seconds to 2-minute cooldown bunch of utility abilities. Then you have your 8 damage buttons, 3 of which are from talents, which might or might not be usable. And then you have 2 cooldown abilities. This one is the same as Nature's Swiftness, the same as Presence of Mind, I believe, the same as your next ability is instant. In this case, your next empowered ability is cast as if it was fully empowered, and that's it. That's the only special thing. And then you have the talent Dragon Rage. You don't actually have a default cooldown. You don't have a default big DPS cooldown. You have to go down very, very early on and take it from the talent. Now, why I think this is a little bit too simple and a little bit too generic is because you have 2 types of things to keep an eye out of. You have your empowered abilities, which look exactly like this. You empower them, and then once they get to the last one, you let them go, and they will do special things. In the case of Eternity Surge, which is your single target ability, the more you empower it, the more targets it will hit. So it's gonna hit 1, 2, 3, or 4 enemies. Then you have another one, which is Fire Breath, which instead is gonna be an AoE ability all the time, but it's going to increase the dot damage it will leave behind. So the more you empower it, the bigger the dot damage is gonna be left behind. That's one of the things you have to play around. The other thing you have to play around is the essences, because if you paid attention, as you are channeling this, your essences don't go anywhere. That's because the empowered abilities function outside of your essences. Your essences are spent by these two abilities right here. They are spent by Disintegrate, which is a single target channel. This is like Mind Flay, basically, right? It's just a channel that ticks for damage, as you can see here. And then you have Pyre, which is a lob magical spell that's gonna explode and do AoE damage. If I use it here, it's gonna hit a whole bunch of targets, right? Those are your main abilities to spend Essence. Essence regenerates by itself. As you can see here, I'm doing nothing and it's gonna come back up. You have some talents to help you with the generation of these essences. This one gives you 6 max essences. This one empowers the regeneration time of your essences, basically like runes of Death Knight, right? You don't actually use your abilities as a Death Knight to generate runes, you just let them come back up by themselves. So you have one mechanic where it's completely detached from everything else and you just wait for their cooldown. Both Eternity Surge and Fire Breath have a 30-second cooldown, so you use your empowered abilities and they go each on a 30-second cooldown, and then you use your spenders to dump all of your essences, right? That's it. The two fillers, the two spam abilities, the two abilities you use if you have nothing else to use are Living Flame, which is hard casted, so you have to actually cast it like if it was a fireball or if it was a wrath or something, you just keep using it. And then you have the instant one, you have Azure Strike, which is like a frost shock of a shaman. You can add a few more things to this ability, like Azure Strike damages 1 additional enemy, and the ability itself already damages 1 extra enemy, so you end up attacking 3 enemies with Azure Strike, except the yard range is very small. So, for example, it can't even hit the 2 targets on the sides of this one with this ability. They have to be closer than that to be able to hit them, to hit more of them. And they don't actually generate essence. If you look at us dumping all of our essence down to 0 and then spamming the Azure Strike, you can see that the essence just generates at its own pace. It takes no account of your abilities you are spamming here. So the entire build at its core is wait for essences by spamming your filler. Whenever you have a free essence to use, you can cast an Esser Spender. And then when your empowered abilities are off cooldown, you can empower them and use them. You use them, you dump your essence. Now you have no essence, both of your empower abilities are on cooldown, so you just lay back and just keep using Essence Burst until you have some more essences, until you have your empowered abilities off cooldown. There is one thing you kept seeing light up, which is Snapfire. This thing right here, it's a talent which you take after Firestorm. Firestorm is the same as Blizzard, is the same as Volley, even the same as Earthquake. You put it on the ground after a cast, and then it's gonna be doing AoE damage periodically. What you saw proc is the 12% chance every Living Flame cast to instantly reset the cooldown of Firestorm and then make it insta-cast and do 40% more damage. That's the thing you keep proccing. The one cyclical mechanic that works for both type of abilities is the Essence Burst. When you hard cast Living Flame, you have a 20% chance, and when you insta-cast Azure Strike, you have a 15% chance to cause an Essence Burst making your next spender free. So let's make it proc. Yeah, there you go. You can see I have 6 essences. I'm casting a spender. I still have 6 essences, and it procced again, so I can use a spender again without spending my essence. Now I finally get to spend my essence. So the entire basic generation, the entire basic rotation of this spec is you just spam filler when you don't have essences. When you have essences, you use your spender, and then when your empowered abilities are off cooldown, you get to use them. It does feel very, very simple, especially because there is very little synergy with all of these abilities. There isn't really anything that functions one after the other that makes sense to use one after the other. Also, this would be even more shrunken down if you consider that this spender is for single target and this spender is for AoE. There is no reason for you to ever use Pyre when you're fighting in single target, for example. So your only option in single target is Disintegrate. That's it. So your rotation in single target is you use Living Flame. Whenever you have Essence, you use Disintegrate. And if your empowered abilities are up, you just use them. That's it. That's all there is. What makes it even more convoluted is that abilities which are supposed to be very big for you, like your empowered ability Eternity Surge, the empowerment of Eternity Surge just makes you hit more enemies. It doesn't actually make you do more damage, which means that if you're fighting in single target, you don't even empower this ability. There is no reason for you to empower this ability. As you can see from our damage, a fully charged Eternity Surge on average was doing about 23,000 damage, right? If I now use it at the first bar and we look at the damage, I did 23,000 damage, even if I just charged it one tiny bar. That's because if I want to hit one target, that's what you have to do. So you have a rotation where you only use one spender out of the 2 you have because it's purely single target. Just like if you were a balanced druid, you only use Star Surge instead of Starfall in single target. Just like if you're a mage, you use Pyro instead of Flame Strike. That's the same here. You only have one empowered ability to use and to fully empower, Fire Breath, because the more you empower this, the more damage it does. But you have no reason to empower this one on single target. You just stop at the first one, and that's it. There are very, very few other ways to change your rotation. There is one ability we haven't mentioned yet, which is this one right here. Shattering Star, it's this one right here. When you use Shattering Star, which does mediocre damage, the bonus of Shattering Star is that you do 20% more damage for 4 seconds after using Shattering Star. You then take this talent, which increases the window of damage increase to 6 seconds. So this puts just a tiny bit more complexity to the rotation. This means that, okay, my hardest hitting abilities are my empowered abilities, right? Those are the ones that hit the most. And even when I proc this one for free to deal 40% more damage, those 3 are the things that will hit the most. So you enter a situation where you want to use Shattering Star when you can fit all of those abilities together in the same short 6-second window. So you're going to be waiting, perhaps until you proc this, until we proc the free cast. It'll take a while. This reminds me of Frost Mage procs. Now you proc it, so you can use Shattering Star, you can proc this one instant, you can use this one on the first one, and then you can use this one on full. There you go. And you use them within this 6-second window of more damage. And then you wait until it's back up again, except that now these cooldowns are so long that you just use it for normal abilities, because the cooldowns of these 2 are just twice as much. So just use it whenever. And as I said, there isn't much saving to this rotation because I took most of the new extra buttons. I took most of the... Actually, I took all of the extra buttons you can take. There is nothing extra, there is nothing new you can take besides this. Most of the things you don't see picked are very basic things, like Pyre has a 10% chance to flare up again and deal more damage to an extra target for AoE, or this one, Deep Breath's damage is increased by 10%, or this one, Azure Strike and Living Flame deal more damage, or this one, Eternity Surge and Shattering Star hit twice as many targets. Doesn't really change anything in your rotation. We haven't pointed out the extra AoE ability, not because it's useless, mostly because it's just a one-time use without too much purpose to it. There you go. Plus the callback, teleport back, that's it. 1 minute cooldown. It's like Sindragosa's Fury, you know, it's like some big AoE you use every minute, and that's it. Doesn't do anything for your rotation. Your cooldowns, as I said, is a very boring 2-minute cooldown to make your next empowered spell instant. So again, you click it, you click this, and it's instant. It's a full charge of a Fire Breath instantly. Okay, 2-minute cooldown is very big for this. And then you have your actual cooldown, Dragon Rage. So you erupt using 3 pyres, so 3 of your spenders, up to 3 different targets, and then for 14 seconds, your Essence Burst chance to proc is 100% guaranteed. So instead of having a 20% chance to proc from Living Flame and a 15% chance to proc from Azure Strike, the Essence Burst mechanic, which makes your spender free, is guaranteed. So this turns you into a Fire Mage, you know, spamming 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Here is Dragon Rage, and then you go 1, proc, and use the spender. Or you can do it the other way around. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Repeatedly. That's all it does. You can add some tiny extra things, like consuming Essence Burst reduces the remaining cooldown of Fire Breath, so you get to use one of your empowered abilities a little bit more often, or things like red spells extend the duration of your Fire Breath damage by 1 second, so if you get to use Living Flame after Fire Breath, you get to extend it, or Essence Burst has a 20% chance not to be consumed, so you get to use it multiple times. However, the main basic rotation stays the same, and it is very, very simple. It does look like overall it has more use in AoE than it does have in single target, because in AoE you have Pyre, which is an AoE, Spender, which is pretty good. You have, of course, the Fire Breath, which can be turned into a good AoE spell. You do have the Eternity Surge, which you can channel to hit multiple targets, not just one target. And then you have the Deep Breath we mentioned that can be used for AoE damage. So it does seem like for AoE it might be okay. I forgot Firestorm to use in AoE as well. And also Azure Strike that you can talent into hitting 3 enemies at the same time. So it does look like you have enough to make AoE perhaps passable. What looks like it's very, very lacking at the moment is single target. You don't have many ways to make single target more enjoyable. The only tiny one, as we mentioned, is Shattering Star, to give you that tiny window of more damage for 6 seconds, but it doesn't feel nearly as satisfying, in particular when your empowered ability's cooldown is so long that, I don't know, it feels not nearly as good. The rotation itself doesn't feel like it flows nearly as well for single target. For AoE, it's perhaps a little bit better. In the end, as we know, it's gonna be about the tuning of Blizzard, so if Blizzard want, all they have to do is to tune certain abilities completely out of whack to make them do just that much more damage. Right? After all, we have seen over the course of the years specs like Havoc Demon Hunter be very, very meta, and that's just because abilities like I-Beam were OP in AoE. Or just now in Shadowlands with Survival Hunter, with Wildfire Bombs. Imagine if we were in the Dragonflight Beta and this new class with this new spec called Survival became live, and we were looking at its abilities in the beta. Raptor Strike, Serpent Sting, Carve, Kill Command, these all look lame. They don't look like they have too much synergy with one another. You know, it doesn't look like a very fun spec. And then it gets released, it gets tier set, and now they do the most damage out of everyone in AoE. So the same could happen to Devastation Evoker as well. You know, if Blizzard makes Eternity Surge OP, or Pyre OP, or Firestorm OP, then they might very well become very, very powerful in Mythic Plus, for example. It can certainly happen. After all, they have a Bloodlust, they have quite a few defensive abilities and utilities. They do have the Deep Breath, which can also be talented, I believe, into a 3-second stun. There it is, Deep Breath stuns enemies, so you have a 1 minute Giga AoE 3-second stun. You have a knockback, you have a knockup, you have abilities like Rescue, you have abilities like Zephyr, which I didn't even take, to get you to take 20% less AoE damage in Mythic Plus to your party, so that can be good as well. You have other abilities that I did not take, like Cauterizing Flame, on a 1 minute cooldown, which dispels all bleed, poison, curse and disease effects on a target, which can also be useful in Mythic Plus. So overall, it looks like a more powerful spec for Mythic Plus than it is for raiding, than it is for single target damage, than it is for burst damage in short windows, compared to its version in AoE for the moment. So that's the take out of looking at Evoker for the first time when it comes to Devastation. I'm starting with Devastation mostly because I am assuming more players will be interested in their DPS version of the spec than the healer version of the spec. So I see the possibility, I see the reasons as to why it could be quite interesting and quite fun to play, but right now it still feels like it's a handicapped version of a spec. It still feels like it's missing a couple of abilities and a couple of mechanics to make the whole rotation feel like one, feel like whole, feel like it has a purpose, rather than a few bits and pieces of disconnected things just kept together by glue. That's how it feels like right now playing Devastation Evoker. That was the first take, the first initial take at Devastation Evoker. Soon enough, Mythic Plus will open, so we will be able to start seeing how it's gonna play out in Mythic Plus as well, overall. But for now, this was the first look at this new incoming spec in Dragonflight. Of course, as usual, thanks guys for watching the videos. If you want to support even more, you can like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself. This feature doesn't cost any money, for the record. When it does cost money, however, we have to thank my Patreon supporters for helping me and for contributing to supporting this channel and allowing me to continue this WoW content for all of you. Lastly, if you want to support even more for more social interactions, you can follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to the Patreon itself right down at these two links. Now, to finish this video, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, I just hope it's not gonna be overtuned and just mask the problems of the spec with huge numbers. I hope it gets changed to be a good spec instead.